In this conversation with my brother, we're going to be talking about the power of staying in your lane, why nobody can beat you at being you, and how to run your race with joy and confidence. And whether you're in a season of transition or just needing a reminder that who you are is enough, this episode is going to encourage you right where you are.
Let me ask you this, and sometimes people say, y'all are always so positive, but how do you stay positive in such a negative-filled world?
I think part of it is God gives us different personalities. Somebody asked me when I started ministering, why did you become a positive preacher? And I thought, well, this is just who I am. I think, there's different personalities, but I do think you can train yourself to see the best, and to think on things that are pure and wholesome. And so, these days, more than ever, there's so much negativity in the world. And I used to watch a lot of news. I don't watch as much news anymore. To me, I like to keep up with things, but I can't put all that stuff into my spirit and stay positive and hopeful. And the first 10 minutes of the news in our town is killings and this and that. And I thought, I don't want to see all that. But so I think it's just important that you control your thought life. I think we all have opportunities to worry, to be negative, to see the worst. But I just tell you what I tell myself. It takes the same amount of energy to believe as it does to worry. In other words, we think, man, what are we going to do? What about the future of the church? We got to raise the finances. We got to do that same energy. If your mind's going to be doing that, why don't you turn it around and say, Father, thank you that you're fighting my battles. Thank you that you're working in my life. Thank you that you're healing my son. Lord, thank you that, use that energy to believe. And so that's what I tell myself. Because, you know what? I'm not saying worry doesn't come to us all and negative thoughts, but it's training your mind to just, you've heard it, turn that worry into worship. Just turn it around and just keep your mind in that frame of mind of just, thanking God for what He's done and thanking God for what He's about to do.
That's good. What would you say to someone who maybe is here tonight that is just struggling? They can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They don't see a way out. They don't see the solutions. They just have no hope.
You have to know that God has you in the palm of His hand. And you have to know that God has not brought you this far to leave you. And so some of my encouragement would be to start feeding your faith. Don't feed your doubt. Don't feed your depression. Put on some good, some good teaching, some good music, but feed your faith. And just, I think one thing I would do is go back and remember the victories that God has given you in the past. Go relive some of those things. Relive your compact centers. And just know that, again, God hasn't brought you this far to leave you. And so I just believe you call out to God and He's going to give you that strength to make it through. But I think, surround yourself with some people of faith. Feed yourself faith. And I think Lisa touched on, or maybe you did, don't believe those never lies. I'm never going to get well. I'm never going to meet the right person. I'm never going to get out of debt. I'm never going to be happy again. The enemy wouldn't be telling you that if he didn't know it wasn't on the way. This is a season. It is a season. That trouble is temporary. It is a season, but the enemy will tell you it's forever. But you're going to walk through that. There are going to be happy days again. There's going to be beauty for ashes. And you just can't get stuck in that season. You walk, I don't think any of us, I think all of us at times, we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Don't get stuck in that valley. Don't make that valley your home. You've got to say, you know what, this too shall pass. God, you are in control, and I just break every force of darkness over my life. And just, again, you've got to talk to yourself. And I'm not saying it's to flip the switch and do it, but I know this, you can walk out of that, and God's going to give you the grace to do it, and there are going to be good days up ahead.
One thing that I like to say is this: just because you didn't come from a healthy family doesn't mean a healthy family can't come from you. And a lot of people didn't come from a faith-filled family, and I know we consider it ourselves so fortunate to come from families who believed God, and we loved being in church. I think we did. We did. We loved to play in church at home and all, but there's a lot of families out here who come from brokenness and non-faith-filled. They didn't come from a family of God. What would you say to those people to encourage them to get their family tree planted in the right place?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I touched on it earlier, but God raised you up to be the one to start this new generational blessing. And so you got to look at it like that, and just Stay planted in the house of the Lord. Get into a good Bible-based church, and start that new lineage. And I think you do it just by honoring God. And I would like to for you to see it as a challenge that you are the one. God has raised you up. 100 years from now, the Lord tarries, people can look back and say, you know what, it was them in 2024. They changed our family line. I mean, it goes back to us, April. Our dad, at 17 years old, he was the first one in our family to give his life to Christ. They were good people. My grandparents on my father's side, I didn't know them that well, but they were good people. They were kind. They were loving. They just didn't know anything about God. But at 17 years old, my dad had a friend in high school that kind of embarrassed him, but he was always talking to him about his faith. And he'd get there early to school and write scriptures on this chalkboard. His name was Sam Martin. My dad used to say, Sam, come on, cool it some. He's kind of embarrassing, but you know what? Sam reached out to him, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, walking home here in Fort Worth, wasn't it? Here in we're not in Fort Worth, but anyway, but here in town, my dad, he felt God calling him. He gave his life to Christ. But here's what I was getting at. He gave his life to Christ. He felt like God called him to preach. He told me, he said, Joel, when I gave my life to Christ, I made a decision that my family was not going to be raised in the poverty and defeat that I was raised in. Because they were raised very poor. So I said all that to say, he made a decision. He said, you know what, I'm a difference maker. He told his parents he was called to minister. I mean, you're talking about me not being qualified. Daddy knew nothing about this. But at 17 years old, his parents said, John, you don't know how to minister? We're farmers. That's all we know how to do. You're going to get out there and fail. But 17 years old, he left us. He hitchhiked and started preaching. And, God took him where he's never dreamed. So just know that, look where I am today in April because one person made a difference. What I'm saying is you're that person. You wouldn't be hearing this if God had not raised you up to set a new standard. I think it's important, too, to not believe those lies that just, how do you say it? Just, we're all addicted. We're all depressed. This is all, you got to see some new things modeled. Maybe what you saw modeled growing up was not normal. Not normal to be angry. Not angry all the time. Not normal to, not have good relationships. So I think sometimes we have to break out of that and say, okay, I was in a limited environment. And I'm going to not knock it, but I'm going to set a new standard. I'm going to get around some healthy people that, and I think you start getting that on the inside. Let me tell you, you can break that, and not even break it, April. I think every generation is supposed to increase. We're building on what our parents built, what our parents started, but God wants every generation to increase. He's a progressive God. And so I think we all ought to go further, but mainly if you haven't seen that, just know that you're the one. And again, to me, it's just being honest with God. God, I need your help to break these generational limitations. And God, I'm trusting you. You call on God and He's going to empower you. He's going to give you wisdom. He's going to open right doors. And you're going to be that difference maker that you're called to be.
I hope you're walking away today reminded that it's not only okay to be you, but it's powerful. Remember, you're gifted, you're called, you're anointed to run your race, not someone else's. So keep showing up, keep being faithful, and keep being you because nobody can do it like you can. Thanks for watching today. If this has encouraged you, make sure you share it with a friend. Remember, you are extraordinary, and I hope you have an amazing day.